Shortly after we graduated from college, Annie and I decided to join the synagogue where I'd been working. The membership packet included a volunteer form with places for family members to write their skills and interests. My column contained things like great with children and loves arts and crafts. Annie had been volunteering for Habitat for Humanity at the time, so her column contained things like great with power tools and loves hanging cabinets. Clearly, building projects are not my area of expertise. So it's ironic that I'm going to talk to you about a Torah portion that's mostly blueprints. The blueprints are for a sacred structure, the Mishkan, our portable sanctuary in the wilderness. These instructions are thorough and practical. There are a lot of cubits involved. I'm sure if we put Annie in charge, we could build the thing today. But the blueprints in Parashat Trumah are also instructions for creating sacred community. God commands, "Ve'asuli mikdash, v'shachanti b'tocham," build for me a sanctuary that I might dwell among them. This is not just a town center, this is a dwelling place for God. Rashi puzzles over a seemingly superfluous phrase in the next verse, v'chein ta'asu, and so shall you do. He interprets it to mean that building a Mishkan was not just a commandment for our ancestors, but an obligation for all time. We are all called to be Mishkan builders. Now, since I assume we're not going to get contractors in to talk about installing a new Mishkan, reading Rashi raises the question, how will we construct sanctuaries in which God can dwell? So much of our time at the College Institute is devoted to asking how we will build sacred communities where people come joyfully to pray and learn and act. And this is a message that speaks loudly in the Parsha, but it also whispers another subtler message. The commandment does not start with schematics. 6 verses before God tells us what we are building, ve'asuli mikdash, God tells us the spirit in which we should build. Daber el b'nei Yisrael vayikhu li trumah me'et kol ish asher yidvenu libo. Tell the children of Israel to bring me gifts from every person whose heart is so moved. Trumah, a gift. Before we can even imagine building the Mishkan, we must inspire people to bring their gifts. When we think about Trumot, we tend to think of material gifts, of gold and silver and dolphin skin and acacia wood. But the text implies that equally important are the offerings of people's hearts. God calls for kol hachmei lev, everyone who is wise of heart. Asher mileitiv ruach chokhmah, in whose spirit I have implanted wisdom. Nachmanides argues that the material goods are also a metaphor for the wisdom and skill that the people brought to the project. The people are the gold and acacia wood. The expression of each spirit is a vital element in the construction of the Mishkan. Each person shared her gift, and the result was an abundance of talent so great that God and Moses were overwhelmed. Every person has a gift, a sacred talent to share. This is their Trumah. Like Moses, Jewish leaders have an obligation to ask people to bring their gifts, knowing that each is a sacred element in the construction of a dwelling place for God. Our communities are vessels overflowing with talent. In his book, 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey describes dichotomous worldviews, a scarcity mentality and an abundance mentality. A person or organization with a scarcity mentality says, I don't have enough. How can I get more? An abundance mentality says, I have everything I need. How blessed am I? Both look at the same data but draw different conclusions. Covey challenges us to move from a mentality that sees only scarcity to one that appreciates abundance. So many Jewish organizations operate from a place of scarcity. There's never enough time, never enough people, never enough money to do the work we want to do. Our synagogues are so desperate for more dues-paying members that the dream of gifts overflowing feels like a fantasy. But Trumot transform our community by enabling us to peer past the perceived scarcity and see an abundance of talent living in our communities. I learned about abundance not from Covey or from the Torah, but from my mother. My mother was a nonprofit consultant who specialized in volunteerism, but more than that, she was my gratitude guru. She made a daily practice of listing out loud the many gifts in her life for which she was grateful. She often shared that this practice of gratitude had been transformative, helping her to navigate even her darkest days because she never lost sight of her abundant blessings. If she were here, she would look out on this sanctuary and see an ocean of Trumot. She believed that each of us had a unique gift to share, and she felt passionately that organizations needed to be better at helping us to create opportunities to share them. This was more than her vocation. This was her conviction. When she looked at people, she saw well springs of talent. When she met someone on a plane or in line at a grocery store, it was seconds before she had them telling her what was most important to them. This was her gift. She was a diviner of talent. When I read this Torah portion, it's her voice I hear whispering. Imagine if each of us could develop skills to find gifts in every person we meet. During my internship last summer, I met Barbara. She and some friends had approached their rabbi, Danny Zemmel, with the idea to start wise aging groups at their synagogue. Rabbi Zemmel, who has a natural abundance mentality, saw in Barbara and her team gifts of passion and vision and organizing skill. With his vision, they started 3 wise aging groups, which have already engaged 40 people. Evelyn participated in one of these groups. She'd been a member of the synagogue for years, but she'd never been particularly active, and she saw this as an opportunity to explore her Jewish identity. In one of the meetings, she shared that in her professional life, she runs a program connecting dance and spirituality. At the next meeting, she led her group in a spiritual movement exercise that everyone found powerfully meaningful. Weeks later, she was sitting in Rabbi Zemmel's office talking about how she could share her gift with even more people. Now she's building new places for God to dwell in her community. My mother used to say, every person in your community has gifts that they would be eager to share, but most have never been asked. The Torah portion teaches us to ask for gifts. As a nonprofit consultant and a believer in abundance, my mother's language for this was volunteer engagement. She wanted Jewish leaders to become volunteer engagement experts, masters at identifying Trumot, and builders of opportunities for the sharing of gifts. Often these gifts will match with what we're already doing, but sometimes, like with Barbara and Evelyn, new ideas will emerge from the unique talents within our community. We cannot say yes to every program idea, but we must learn to say yes to every talent, to match people's talents to our mission. What if we planned our program calendar in dialogue with people's gifts? We see this in the Parashat. God doesn't start with program, make me a sanctuary. God starts by asking for gifts. God knows that people aren't motivated by building funds. People are motivated when we speak to their hearts and their wisdom. In 2 weeks, we will read about a very different building project, the golden calf. Aaron tells the frightened people to drop off their gold, and he builds the calf for them. They pay their dues, and they say, "Do this for us." What Aaron builds is not a dwelling place, but an idol. The golden calf is the kind of building project that comes out of scarcity, built out of the fear that Moses had disappeared. The move from the calf to the tabernacle is a move from scarcity to abundance. It's the abundance that comes when we ask for people's gifts and not just their gold. If we want to build our modern mishkanot out of abundance, we need volunteer engagement that permeates every aspect of our institutions. And as leaders, we must model this engagement to our staff and lay leadership. A few weeks ago, I was sitting with a congregant who works as a corporate consultant. He was telling me about his fear about declining engagement in Jewish life, and he shared ideas for how we might create a unified message of engagement around the high holidays. I said, "It sounds like your gift is messaging. You could help us articulate our vision more clearly." As we moved from talking about his ideas to talking about his gifts, I could see his eyes brighten and his demeanor change. Something holy happened in that moment. What if rabbis and cantors and educators and administrators and professors made a sacred practice, a spiritual practice, out of sitting with people and helping them to name their gifts? But it's not enough to identify gifts. We have to create opportunities to share them with the community. It's not enough for me to say, "Your gift is messaging." We must figure out how he can put that gift to use. When I started this sermon, I told you a story about filling out a volunteer form at my synagogue. The sad but unsurprising ending is that no one ever called us about anything on that form. They asked us to identify our gifts, but then they never gave us a place in which we could share them. From the golden calf to our own organizations, we've seen what happens when we fail to engage people around their gifts. Parashat Trumah is about asking for gifts and putting them to use. Let us imagine for a moment a synagogue that pursues volunteer engagement at every level. Picture meeting the congregants and staff of Temple Ohev Mitnadev. Shira is a market researcher. She volunteers while her kids are at preschool, helping the office to interpret data from a recent parent survey. She loves it because she can offer her professional skills at a time that works in her schedule. Adam's bar mitzvah is in May. For his mitzvah project, he planned a workshop for older congregants to learn computer skills so that they can FaceTime with their faraway grandkids. Miriam has been exploring her love of prayer in the Cantor's advanced liturgy class. Soon she and the other participants will be able to lead meaningful Shiva Minyanim. When new members join the congregation, they meet a retiree named Edith, one of the synagogue's Trumah coaches, who helps them to identify their gifts and connects them with synagogue activities they might find meaningful. Rebecca, the director of volunteer engagement, works with every staff member to tap into this ever-expanding pool of talent. Congregants here don't just serve on committees. I've never met anyone whose sacred gift is the ability to sit on committees. Rather, congregants share their time and their talent in ways that enrich their lives and the life of the congregation. Some are eager to share their professional skills, while others share surprising hidden talents. Some people's sacred gift is as simple as a free hour and an eagerness to help. The work of the synagogue is not simply programs, it's finding and sharing gifts. In the Torah, the Israelites eventually come back to Moses and say, "The people have brought more trumot than we know what to do with." When we ask for gifts, abundance overflows. When we engage people around their sacred Trumot, together we build a sanctuary. When we build with our gifts, it's not just our communities that we make into a sanctuary, it's also our lives. Ve'asuli mikdash, build for me a sanctuary, v'shachanti bitocham, that I may dwell in them. Not bitocho, so that I may dwell in it, the sanctuary. Bitocham, so that I may dwell in them. The divine presence would come to rest in the heart of the Israelites, and not in the wood and the metal of the tabernacle. If we bring our gifts, if we put them to sacred use, God will dwell in us. The people we serve are searching for sacred meaning. They aspire to understand their place in a confusing world. They are eager to find purpose and encounter God. They have scarcity and crave abundance. When we walk with them on a journey of discerning their Trumot, we give them a path to find what they are looking for. When we help people to identify their gifts and offer them in the community, we invite them to experience the unique wisdom that God has placed inside them and see their sacred purpose. Think of Evelyn, who discovered that her dance could speak to her Judaism and that her gift could move her community to a higher place. This is different from other volunteerism. Jews already volunteer in incredibly high numbers, coaching youth soccer and delivering meals on wheels, but volunteerism in Jewish organizations feels different. This is the core of Trumah. The root of that Hebrew word is unclear. Some scholars trace it to an Akkadian word meaning to lift up. Jewish leaders help people to lift up their talents by reminding them that those talents are gifts that they receive from God. At the PTA bake sale, saying thanks to God for your brownie prowess would be cause for concern. But in sacred community, that's exactly our goal. My mother showed me that gratitude is a deeply religious conviction. When we say thanks for our blessings in a Jewish context, we have a language and a community in which to acknowledge their source. Whether people use their talents to transform our communities or turn them outward to change the world, we help them to lift up their gifts from the secular to the sacred in the service of the one who gave them. This is not just a tool for us to do more work. This is a means for us to change more lives. We can move people from the scarcity of who am I to the abundance of I have purpose. As Jewish leaders, we have a sacred obligation to help people find their sacred Trumot and to build sanctuaries where those gifts can be shared. So let us build. Let us build out of abundance. Let us build mishkanot that can stand the test of time. Let us build with people's gifts, with their artistry and wisdom, which are pathways for God to be present in their lives. Let us build for our communities so that our sanctuaries and social halls can be places where God dwells. This is not a means to an end. This is the essence of the call. Let us build. When we do, we discover God dwelling among us. Boker Tov.